Hey guys, tonight's story is about one of the most surreal hacks in US intelligence history. A group of teenage hackers known as Crackers with Attitude, who breached the personal AOL account of CIA Director John Brennan using nothing more than social engineering. No midnight raids, no code red alarms, just a few deceptive phone calls and stolen digits that unlocked access to his private email, and years of hidden government secrets. So, before you get comfortable, if you enjoy what I do here, consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps me keep making these videos, and drop a comment, letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see the night owls tuning in. Now, dim the lights, put on some headphones for a more immersive experience, and let's ease into tonight's story together. October 2015, a cold autumn day. John Brennan answers a call from an unknown number. He pauses, then picks up. "Hello, John Brennan. Who is this? You're a loser." For anyone else, it might have been an ordinary prank. But Brennan wasn't anyone. He was director of the CIA, one of the most powerful men alive. "How did you get this number?" "It was easy, bro. You're such a moron." "What do you want?" "Nothing. I already own you." "How much?" $5 trillion. Later, the government would classify this call as part of identity theft, harassment of officials, and cyber terrorism. But at the time, it was just a moment of humiliating trollish glory. "Why are you doing this? Stop bombing the Middle East." Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in England's West Midlands, a 15-year-old kid sat in his room, still holding the phone. He couldn't believe what he had just pulled off. He called himself Cracker. He liked smoking weed. He was high right then. Cracker was the leader of a group called Crackers with Attitude. Together, they managed to terrorize and humiliate America's security services in ways almost no one else ever had. They leaked personal details of FBI agents, DOJ officials, even police officers. They passed classified files straight to Julian Assange. Some of the activism the world thought came from Anonymous. It was them, and a lot of it was done just for the laughs. But this wasn't only trolling. These teenagers hacked and hijacked computers belonging to US intelligence agencies. They were Crackers with Attitude. 2008, Virginia. Another teenager known only as Default. He was an ordinary kid. He loved soccer, his dog, and video games. He clashed often with his father, who worked for the government. Default's first brush with hacking came from cheating in games. It felt exciting, powerful, bending the rules with a keyboard. He dove deeper, hungry to learn everything about how computers worked and how to control them. 2008 was the perfect time. Anonymous was at its peak. If you got into their secret chats, you had a front row seat to their operations. Anonymous was one of the largest digital vigilante groups ever. They breached corporations, governments, anyone they wanted. Their message, citizens of the world, due process is gone. A cyber war has begun. Default was hooked. Anonymous embodied chaos disguised as freedom. They showed you could grab the world's attention without leaving your room. Sometimes political, sometimes pure trolling. Inspired? Default hacked random sites just to test his skills to see if he could. After hanging out in anonymous chats for a while, Default started seeing the problems. The group felt cringe. It was crawling with federal agents, people were getting arrested constantly, and nobody could trust anyone. Anonymous had grown too big. No one could properly check new members anymore. The result was endless fighting, petty doxing, and complete chaos. And because most news outlets only knew the name Anonymous, the group kept getting credit for hacks done by other, often more skilled crews. To Default, it was a complete mess. So he shifted direction. He got involved with smaller spin-off groups, including one called AnonSec. The group defined itself as anti-anonymous, though in practice it wasn't that different. They carried out ops, some with political motives, others just, as people said in 2008, for the lols. AnonSec was more advanced technically, and Default kept improving his skills. The group ran a botnet, a network of hacked computers under their control. A botnet could spread malware across the internet, growing its numbers, or be aimed at a server to flood and crash it completely. Default was poking around AnonSec's botnet and got curious about what computers they had under their control. He found that one was a server belonging to the Canadian medical school Windsor University. Suddenly, Default had direct access to the university's entire financial system. He pulled up records of students who owed the school money. It all added up to $9.4 million in total debt. And at the bottom of the list, something very tempting appeared, a delete all button. How could he not push it? These people might really enjoy having their slate wiped clean, as it were, he said later. Some of them owed a substantial amount of money, like $70,000. I think some people owed upwards of over $100,000. It's a lot of money, you know? Perpetual debt that can last for decades. So I just deleted everything. I went into the PHP shell and just sent everything to /dev null. Just shredded it. Whatever I sent there is just not coming back. This comes from the podcast Darknet Diaries. They have a fantastic episode featuring Default. Of course, this story raises some questions. We tried asking the university if the debt stayed deleted. They didn't answer. But usually student loans have multiple backups both online and offline, on-site and off-site. There should be hard copies of the student-signed loan agreement somewhere. However, Default felt like he was really accomplishing something meaningful at the time. There's a certain rush to committing a crime when it feels like doing the right thing. Other hackers might have used the sensitive student information to make a profit instead. There's actually a shadow industry worth billions surrounding our most sensitive personal data. So-called data brokers gather all the information available about us on the internet. Your contact information, browsing history, and online transactions. This data gets bundled into shadow profiles, which are then sold to the highest bidder. You might receive a tailored email or a robocall based on your shadow profile. In the worst case, someone might try to steal your identity entirely. More and more of Default's hacking activities were motivated by altruism, rather than just curiosity or thrills. As recently as 2014, bestiality was still legal in Denmark. Other European countries, Germany, the UK, Sweden, had recently banned it completely. What this meant for Denmark was a significant increase in animal sex tourism. For years, Danish animal rights activists tried desperately to bring attention to this horrific situation. They called them dog brothels. So sick. It's so crazy. And I had a dog, so that really pissed me off. Just thinking about what if someone took my dog, and that happened to my dog, I would freak out completely. As Default describes it, he and other anonymous hackers lent their technical skills to the animal rights movement's cause. We took down the official Denmark government website and then actually defaced it, and said, did you know that your government allows bestiality? And there are bestiality dens where people can go and pay money to do these things to animals, and most of them are people's pets. They shut down bestiality websites using DDoS attacks and tweeted evidence of sexually mistreated animals. The information spread around the world and was widely condemned by the international community. Anonymous got credit for non-sex actions which deeply annoyed Default. But it worked perfectly. In part due to the hacks, more people knew about Danish dog brothels. They talked about them online, protested them, until the case wound up in Parliament. In April 2015, Denmark finally banned bestiality completely. Virginia, Default's bedroom. While mastering the art of digital warfare, he stumbles into something else, cryptocurrency. Bitcoin was young, cheap, almost worthless to most people. Default saw potential. He accumulated over 1,000 coins, storing them on a hard drive tucked away in his room. Today, that stash would be worth $40 million. But money wasn't his only concern. He knew he was painting targets on powerful backs. Paranoia consumed him. OPSEC became religion. His own Wi-Fi? Never. Too dangerous. Instead, he rigged a satellite dish, connecting to a Dairy Queen's free internet half a mile away. Every connection routed through Tor. Multiple layers of encryption protected every device. Power down, encrypt. Power up. Wait 30 agonizing minutes for decryption to complete. He told no one. Secrets were survival. The weight of what he possessed, both digital wealth and digital weapons, pressed down on him daily. He understood the stakes. One mistake could cost him everything. But paranoia, no matter how thorough, has limits. May 2013. Honolulu. A 29-year-old intelligence contractor stares at his computer screen. Edward Snowden has everything. A house in paradise, a girlfriend he loves, a $200,000 salary. But he's discovered something that makes it all meaningless. The US government can spy on anyone. Everyone. Any person who's ever touched a computer is fair game. And Snowden helped build this surveillance machine. The guilt eats at him. His own government violates citizens' rights daily. Telling a lawyer would be a felony. Telling a judge would be a felony. Even telling Congress would send him to prison for life. He might never see his family again. They might face consequences too. But silence is complicity. He's been collecting evidence for months. Now he downloads the final documents. I need time off for my epilepsy, he tells his employer. The lie buys him escape time. Hong Kong. He chooses it for its free speech protections. There he meets journalists Laura Poitras and Glenn Greenwald. He hands over proof of what conspiracy theorists had claimed for years. Edward Snowden becomes the most important whistleblower of the digital age. The world reacts with outrage. Privacy versus security debates explode globally. Young Americans like Default Watch inspired. Default doesn't want to be spied upon. He wants intelligence officials to feel what it's like. To have their privacy violated, their secrets exposed, their power questioned. Time to join forces with Cracker and his crew. Leicester, England, 2015. A gritty housing estate where former coal miners once lived. Nothing much happens here except getting high and going online. 15-year-old Cracker does both religiously. He's furious about corruption, surveillance, and especially America's Middle East adventures. Palestine haunts him. Gaza's suffering fuels his rage. The US enables the violence, he believes. Time to act. This isn't just trolling, it's political warfare. I was really angry about us foreign policy, he'd later explain. So he founds Crackers with attitude. His first target, James Clapper, National Director of Intelligence, Obama's spy chief. One Google search reveals Clapper's phone number and address. Amateur hour security for America's top spy. Cracker hacks Clapper's email, posts proof on Twitter. Default notices immediately. Then Cracker gets creative. He redirects Clapper's house phone to the Free Palestine movement. Every call becomes a political statement. Default tweets his respect. They start chatting. Meanwhile, Edward Snowden himself calls out Clapper in a German interview. The video gets banned from US and German networks, pulled from YouTube repeatedly. Only quotes survive. The breaking point is seeing the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, directly lie under oath to Congress. What we do not do is spy unlawfully on Americans. Cracker and Default see the lie. They're livid. Time to embarrass more intelligence officials. Show them they're not untouchable. John Brennan, CIA director, tops their hit list. Brennan makes the same mistake as Clapper. He doxes himself. His phone number sits online, public, waiting. Cracker discovers it's Verizon. Time to play tech support. Hi, I'm an on-site technician having trouble with a customer. Cracker tells Verizon's internal support. They ask for his employee code. He improvises, makes one up. It works. The support tech hands over everything. Account number, PIN, Brennan's private email address. Social engineering at its finest. Armed with fragments of personal information, address here, social security digits there, Cracker takes over Brennan's AOL account. The CIA director uses AOL. In 2015, inside the email, Cracker finds Brennan's private cell number. He shares it with Default. They launch their assault, spam calls to America's spy chief and his family. I told him he was a piece of shit, Cracker would later admit. You are awful people. You're not doing any net positive things for the world. You're just not. Brennan panics. These aren't just pranks to him. Who's calling? What do they want? He goes into hiding with extra security for his family. The head of the CIA, afraid of teenagers. Inside Brennan's email, Cracker discovers gold, classified documents. He posts screenshots on Twitter first, testing the waters. Then, channeling Snowden's spirit, he contacts WikiLeaks. Julian Assange takes interest. October 2015, WikiLeaks publishes everything. Brennan's 47-page SF-86 security clearance application goes public. Criminal history, psychological records, past drug abuse, intimate details no spy chief wants exposed. But that's just the beginning. Bush-era Middle East policy recommendations surface. Internal congressional correspondence about making torture compliant and legal leaks out. The Senate Intelligence Committee's dirty secrets spill across the internet. The breach costs $1.5 million in damages and relocation costs. Several operatives vanish into hiding. The embarrassment? Priceless. How hard was hacking the CIA director? Out of 10? 1. He's supposed to be so high in the government like head of the CIA. He should be more clever. Can you tell us about yourself? I'm below 20 years old. I smoke pot and I live in America. Every day? Somewhere in his safe house, John Brennan must be watching this interview, fury building inside him. CWA isn't finished. They're just getting started. With Clapper's accounts compromised, they social engineer their way deeper into government systems. FBI Deputy Director Mark Giuliano falls next. His account reveals a database with 9,000 Department of Justice officials and 20,000 FBI agents' personal information. CWA dumps it online. Then they breach the Justice Department's joint automated booking system. Every US prisoner's records at their fingertips. They search for fellow hackers like Jeremy Hammond, post their files for the world to see. Institution after institution falls. Embarrassment spreads like wildfire through Washington. Did these kids think they'd escape consequences? At the time, I really didn't care, Default admits. That was towards the end of the run, and I was just like, all bets are off. I'd gone all the way down the rabbit hole. I'd become very disillusioned with people's complacency and their lack of care for what was going on. So it's like, we're going to bring attention to this with chaos and mayhem. Cracker knows he's poked a nuclear-powered bear. Consequences are coming. He just doesn't know what form they'll take. I'm going to Russia and live with Snowden because I know the government are pretty mad about this. I'm probably going to get tortured. I'm actually a pretty fast runner. Default's OPSEC obsession keeps him safe for months. But humans make mistakes. Emotions betray even the most careful hackers. He starts dating his friend's ex-girlfriend. I asked him in advance if it was okay. Default insists. He said, sure, go for it, I'm way over it. But some wounds never heal. One night, Default and his friend hang out, drinking, gaming on Xbox Live. The news breaks. CIA director hacked. Default can't resist. I slip up for the first time ever, being arrogant and cocky. It comes on the news. CIA director hacked. Blah blah blah, all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that was us, blah blah. I was drunk talking and just totally gave myself away. He never thought his friend would betray him. Hell, he didn't think his friend would even believe him. But jealousy and betrayal make people do terrible things. Today, Default is pretty sure this friend turned him in. When the FBI raids you, they don't knock politely. FBI agents storm Default's room just as his computer finishes decrypting. The assault rifles point at his face. They drag him out, flash copy his hard drive before re-encryption kicks in, seize every piece of equipment. Default knows he's finished. But the worst part? Watching agents carry off his hard drive, the one with nearly 1,000 Bitcoin. His $40 million fortune, gone. He blacks out. British police raid Cracker's home. His computers disappear into evidence bags. One CWA member gets arrested in the US, 3 more in the UK. The crew that terrorized America's intelligence agencies faces justice. Cracker catches a break. Underage in the United Kingdom means lenient treatment. 2 years in juvenile detention. He becomes the first minor in UK history imprisoned for hacking. Today he keeps his head down, done with crime. He wants a cybersecurity career and a quiet life. He refused our interview request. Default pays a much higher price. Federal prison. 5 years. $145,000 in restitution. Solitary confinement due to prison regulations eats away months of his life. In court he pleads, I thought what I was doing was right in terms of political justice. But 2 years later I realized I was completely wrong. Even Snowden doesn't get peace. Intelligence officials publicly fantasize about killing him. Russia becomes his permanent prison. Whether you're a principled whistleblower who understands the weight of your revelations, or a stoned teenager furious at world injustices, crossing the US government changes your life forever. Make sure it's worth it. December 2023. The Biden administration renews a controversial surveillance program. The act allows spying on anyone worldwide without warrants, including American citizens. It maintains a vast database of electronic communications, supposed to be accessed only for legitimate intelligence operations. But a 2023 US court ruling reveals the FBI has misused this database 278,000 times. Unlawful searches exploded between 2016 and 2020. They snooped on congressional campaign donors. They watched suspected January 6 rioters. They surveilled Black Lives Matter protesters. The surveillance state Snowden exposed keeps growing. The government CWA embarrassed keeps watching. The program's Default and Cracker tried to expose through chaos and mayhem march on unchecked. Maybe they're watching us too. The kids who hacked the CIA showed just how fragile the digital world can be when the wrong hands get access. But while their stunt was reckless mischief, someone else was running a far darker operation, one that wasn't about bragging rights, but about building a $300 million empire in drugs, money laundering, and shadows. This is the story of the king of the dark web. Staten Island, 2015. Late night. Anthony Coronadi, fitness-obsessed, walks through empty streets toward his drop point. He's expecting steroids from a bodybuilding forum deal. Nothing unusual, just another pickup. But when he arrives, something feels wrong. The package is bigger, heavier. It rattles differently when he lifts it. Coronadi's paranoia kicks in. Instead of his usual direct route home, he decides to play it safe. He stuffs the box into his backpack, walks several blocks, waves down a taxi, cash only. No questions asked. His instincts scream danger. This isn't routine anymore. The cab drops him miles away on an empty street. Coronadi pays cash, disappears into shadows. He slips into a narrow alley, enters an abandoned building through a side entrance. Inside, he changes clothes quickly, stuffs his backpack into a trash bag, exits through a different door. Classic counter-surveillance moves for a simple steroid pickup. Finally home, he places the mysterious box on his bed, grabs a cutter, opens it carefully. No steroids inside. Instead, dozens of supplement pill jars. He opens one, examines a colorful pill with a stamped picture. Recognition hits him like a sledgehammer. MDMA. Several kilos worth. This isn't his order. This is someone else's fortune. Coronadi panics. He immediately contacts his dealer. Liston is here, through encrypted email. The response comes within minutes. Wrong package sent. Reship to this address. I'll pay you for the trouble. Coronadi agrees. It seems like a simple mistake. One favor for easy money. He has no idea what he's stepping into. This isn't a one-time error. This is recruitment. Liston just found his newest pawn in an international drug empire that moves tons of product worldwide, generates tens of millions in profit, and operates like a perfectly oiled criminal machine. Anthony Coronadi just became a reshipper for one of the dark web's most successful cartels. He doesn't know it yet, but his life just changed forever. This is the story of Liston is here. North Carolina, January 2017. Past midnight, DEA agents crouch in surveillance positions, watching a house. Inside lives a woman they believe is Liston is here, the dark web's most elusive drug kingpin. Liston is legendary in criminal circles, active since 2012, sold through Silk Road 1, Silk Road 2, Alpha Bay, and dozens of other marketplaces. His specialty? Pills. MDMA, benzos, occasional steroids, and ketamine. By 2017, he's moved millions in product. Law enforcement agencies across 3 continents want him dead or alive. Tonight, they think they've found him. The surveillance team has watched their suspect for days. She's careful, professional, keeps a low profile. Packages arrive and leave, but no concrete evidence emerges. Tonight feels different. An officer spots her disposing of unusually large trash bags. His curiosity spikes, but timing is everything. The garbage truck rounds the corner, minutes away from collecting evidence forever. He has to move now, or lose everything. The agent waits until the suspect goes inside. Then he strikes, racing toward the trash bags before the collection truck arrives. Middle of the night. While his suspect sleeps, the agent rifles through her garbage. The first bag contains nothing interesting. Normal household waste. The second bag changes everything. Yellow sparkling substance. A lot of it. 2.5 kilos of pure MDMA dust. Jackpot. The 18th of January, 2017. Buncombe County, North Carolina. Amanda Troll, 31, calls a local steakhouse. She wants a reservation for tomorrow night, her mother's 67th birthday. They haven't seen each other in months, and Troll wants to make it special. Her father abandoned them when she was 5. But her mother and brother always supported her through every crisis, every problem, every dark moment. Troll wakes up excited. Today she'll see her mother again. Around 4 p.m, she puts on her shoes, ready to leave for the restaurant. Chaotic shouting erupts in her apartment complex. Her door explodes inward. Armed officers flood her living room, weapons drawn, screaming commands. Arrest. Handcuffs. Interrogation room. Meanwhile, 7 p.m. Troll's mother sits alone in the restaurant. She's been waiting 2 hours. Her phone calls go unanswered. She thinks her daughter forgot her birthday dinner. In reality, her daughter is being grilled by federal agents about running one of America's largest dark web drug operations. Inside Troll's apartment, agents discover a pharmacy's worth of illegal drugs, 59 kilos of MDMA, 14 kilos of ketamine, enough to supply half the East Coast. But during interrogation, Troll drops a bombshell. She's not Liston is here, she's just a reshipper, a pawn in a much larger operation. Dark web vendors rarely ship directly to customers. Too risky. Instead, they use reshippers to obscure the connection between source and buyer. Multiple layers of separation protect the masterminds. Troll explains how it works, and how she got trapped inside. Reshippers like Troll receive packages from the source. Instructions come with each shipment. Repackage the drugs, send to a new address, sometimes to customers, sometimes to other reshippers. Layer upon layer of criminal insulation. The packages arrive with typed instructions on plain paper. No company logos, no identifying marks. Just addresses and deadlines. Repackage contents into smaller parcels. Use different shipping companies. Provide tracking numbers within 24 hours. Troll learns to work fast. Latex gloves, basement workspace, digital scale. The routine becomes mechanical. Troll was struggling financially years ago. Someone named Benjamin Roden introduced her to reshipping. Easy money, $800 to $1,000. $400 per package. 4 to 7 shipments monthly. The bills were crushing her. 2 part-time jobs weren't enough for rent, car payments, loans. When Roden approached her at a coffee shop, his offer sounded like salvation. Simple courier work, he called it. Overseas merchandise that needs domestic forwarding. The first packages seemed legitimate. Proper labels, professional packaging. The money was immediate. Cash payment, same day. Eventually, Roden connected her to the boss. Liston is here. What started as occasional work escalated quickly. The transition happened over months. Roden mentioned the real boss more frequently. Someone who paid better for increased responsibility. When Liston contacted Troll directly through encrypted messaging, the volume exploded. 4 packages monthly became 4 weekly, then sometimes 4 daily. Troll's affidavit reveals she shipped over 4,200 packages to addresses across the US, Canada, Jamaica, and Ireland. One address stood out: Staten Island. It both sent and received dozens of shipments, suggesting another major node in Liston's network. The numbers shocked even her lawyer: 4,247 packages over 18 months. Her basement operation expanded to fill 2 storage units. She hired her brother to help with driving. That Staten Island address bothered her most. Unlike regular customers, this location both sent and received packages. The flow suggested someone running their own distribution network. The 1st of March, 2017. Staten Island. Early morning. New York Drug Enforcement Strike Force agents carry 4.5 kilos of MDMA tablets in their vehicle. They're heading to an abandoned house to deposit the package. The house sits on a quiet residential street. Overgrown lawn, boarded windows, for sale sign weathered beyond reading. Perfect for a controlled delivery. The agents know this routine. Plant the package. Establish surveillance. Wait for collection. The MDMA tablets are real but tagged with invisible markers. Every pill traceable back to this moment. The US Postal Inspection Service confirms the deposit in their systems. Now they wait for someone to collect their bait. The surveillance team positions itself before dawn. Unmarked vehicles on adjacent streets, plainclothes officers in nearby yards, camera crews in second-story windows across the street. This isn't just about catching one reshipper. It's about mapping the entire network. Every face, every license plate, every movement gets documented. Hours pass. Finally, a man approaches the house, retrieves the package. The moment he exits the gate, undercover officers pounce. The waiting tests everyone's patience. False alarms trigger when joggers pass by. A postal worker delivering mail to neighboring houses causes confusion. But at 2:47 p.m., a dark sedan pulls up. A man exits casually, walks to the abandoned house like he owns it. He retrieves the package without hesitation, heads back toward his car. That's when the trap springs shut. Anthony Coronady. The same Anthony Coronady who operated a fraudulent hedge fund called Bid to Ask LLC in 2014, stealing investors' money for plastic surgery and Caribbean vacations. Now he's moving drugs for Liston is here. Another pawn captured. A few hours tick by. A man approaches the house, casual as can be. He grabs the package and heads back through the gate. That's when everything explodes into action. The takedown happens fast. Undercover cops surge from their hiding spots like wolves on prey. The man doesn't even get a chance to run. They slam him to the ground, package still clutched in his hands. "You're under arrest." His wallet reveals his identity before he even speaks. His name? Anthony Coronady. The cops run his details and find something juicy. This same Anthony Coronady, also from Staten Island, was already in the system for fraud. The criminal history makes perfect sense. Born hustler who never learned to quit. The database shows multiple addresses, all in Staten Island. Employment history shows gaps filled with consulting work, code for whatever scheme was running at the time. Credit reports reveal the typical pattern of someone living beyond legitimate means. Back in 2014, he ran a fake hedge fund called Bid to Ask LLC. Instead of investing people's money, he just stole it. Plastic surgery, Caribbean vacations, all funded by his victims. Classic scumbag move. The hedge fund scam was textbook. Impressive office lease in Manhattan. Professional website with fabricated performance charts. Fake testimonials from satisfied investors. Coronady convinced people he was running sophisticated trading algorithms. In reality, he was just stealing deposits to fund his lifestyle. When investors asked for withdrawals, he paid them with new investors' money. Basic Ponzi scheme dressed up with financial jargon. But now Coronady's singing a different tune. "I work for someone called Lon," he insists. This all started with a failed steroid buy years ago. Lon manipulated me, promised easy cash. The reshipping game was just Lon's latest hustle. The interrogation reveals the connection. After the hedge fund collapsed, Coronady needed income fast. Court-ordered restitution, legal fees, and his expensive lifestyle habits didn't disappear. When someone named Lun contacted him through encrypted channels, the offer seemed reasonable. Simple package forwarding, no questions asked. Better pay than his legitimate consulting work with none of the overhead. Here's where it gets really interesting. Coronady drops a bombshell. He didn't buy those steroids on the dark web like you'd expect. No onion emails, no Wicker messages, no PGP encryption. Nothing sophisticated. He contacted Lon through a bodybuilding forum, where this guy just posted his Gmail, lon.isher@gmail.com, amateur hour. I dug through dark web market databases and found Liston's Silk Road 2.0 profile. There it was, a proper onion email address. This Gmail that Coronady gave police? That was from before Lon even knew how to hide properly. Before he understood anonymity protocols. The guy was basically operating naked online. Thanks to Coronady's confession, police now had a direct line to whoever was behind those Liston usernames. The digital breadcrumbs were falling into place. One amateur mistake was about to bring down an entire operation. Things keep getting better for law enforcement. They now have 2 compromised members of Liston's crew, plus a steady stream of incoming packages they can trace straight back to the source. Almost every single package from Liston's network originates from the same place, Coventry, United Kingdom. October 2017, Coventry. It's past midnight when Banmeet Singh, 33-year-old Indian man, walks into one of the local post offices. He's carrying packages addressed to some apartment in North Carolina. The teller glances at the return address. Completely fake, obviously, but he doesn't give a shit. Takes the money, processes the shipment. Singh pays and walks out into the night. Just another transaction. But what Singh doesn't realize is that his entire world is about to collapse. Every step he takes is being watched, every package tracked. The net is closing. What Singh doesn't know is that across the street, officers from the UK's National Crime Agency are watching his every move. They're working with US DEA agents. This is international now. They believe Singh is the mastermind behind the entire LON organization. Most likely, mixed teams of UK and US law enforcement started surveilling every post office in Coventry. They made lists. Suspicious patterns. People sending packages daily while rotating locations, changing outfits, using fake return addresses. Eventually, Singh made their surveillance list. When a package linked to him arrived at a compromised reshipper's address, law enforcement confirmed it. Singh was Liston. The pieces clicked together. "We got him," someone probably said in a surveillance van. After months of watching, waiting, building their case, they finally had their target. The man behind millions in drug sales was about to learn what real consequences looked like. Once authorities pinned Singh as their main suspect, his finances started looking sketchy as hell. He owned a bunch of companies under the Antilia name, but none of them made any money. Yet somehow this guy was living comfortably. Red flags everywhere. The UK task force immediately alerted US authorities. Given the massive amounts of drugs and cash flowing through Singh's operation, the Americans decided to move. The 26th of April, 2019, Coventry, United Kingdom, 4 a.m. Two blacked-out cars tear through empty streets. Inside, armed special forces heading straight for Singh's residence. Every second counts. Singh could wipe his computer data in moments. If that happened, critical evidence would vanish forever. They reach the target. Doors slam open. 5 officers sprint to the entrance and smash through. Singh jolts awake, but before he can even process what's happening, there's a gun barrel inches from his face. "Don't move." Singh surrenders without resistance. Thanks to their lightning speed, he couldn't destroy anything. Inside the house, law enforcement hits the jackpot. Most importantly, they discover a wallet containing 3,838 Bitcoin on one of his devices. Transaction analysis links most of it directly to Lon's drug empire. Singh gets shipped to a British jail while the US starts fighting for extradition. 4 years of legal battles later, Singh loses all appeals. March 2023, he's extradited to Ohio. Another year in prison until he finally accepts a plea deal in 2024. He promises to forfeit all his Bitcoin, supposedly worth over $300 million. But here's where things get crazy again. Transaction logs showed Singh received at least 8,000 Bitcoin from drug sales. Yet he claimed he only had access to the 3,838 seized in 2019. Where was the rest? Allegations surfaced that he'd sent massive chunks to ak.parenda@gmail.com. That email belonged to Parenda Singh, Banmeet's brother. No solid proof exists, but it's extremely likely some or all of the missing 4,000 plus Bitcoin went to Parenda, either as insurance or because Parenda was part of the Liston cartel. At that time, 4,000 Bitcoin was worth around $150 million. The 25th of April, 2024, somewhere in India. After countless flights and drives, Banmeet finally reaches his family home. His brother, Parenda, father, and relatives welcome him back. They feast, laugh, and celebrate his release. But minutes after everyone goes to sleep, Indian police storm the house. They arrest Parenda. 4 days later, police raid a new house in Haldwani where Banmeet had relocated. Authorities discover a device containing over 268 Bitcoin, immediately linking it to Banmeet's Liston activities. This leads to his arrest again. Now, both brothers sit in jail. What's fascinating is the ED's press release states this investigation started from a US request. This suggests America wasn't letting Singh keep his other Bitcoin half and indirectly wanted Parenda arrested too. Some rumors claim Indian authorities planted the Bitcoin because the US simply wanted Parenda imprisoned. Far-fetched, but not impossible. The trial continues today. Even though Banmeet served time in English and American prisons, both brothers could face additional sentences in India. Indian authorities want to confiscate the remaining 3,600 Bitcoin, now worth almost $230 million. Whether they'll ever get it remains questionable. Whether Banmeet and Parenda even still have the remaining Bitcoin is another mystery entirely. The dark web drug dealer built his empire online, hidden behind screens and encrypted networks. But long before the internet changed the game, there was another figure who didn't need keyboards or code. just guts, planes, and an iron will. He became known as America's most dangerous drug smuggler, and his story is unlike anything you've heard. This man was a pilot, but nobody knew he'd become the biggest drug smuggler in American history. $20 billion worth of narcotics. That's what this guy moved. The crazy part? He didn't look like any smuggler you'd imagine. Far from it. This was a successful businessman who owned a massive company and rubbed shoulders with politicians and power players. There's literally a photo of him standing next to the US president. How does someone like that traffic drugs right under everyone's noses without raising a single red flag? Here's the insane part. He kept smuggling drugs even during his own trial. While prosecutors discussed his trafficking charges in court, he was still moving product. They never caught on. He walked free on all counts. Get ready for the most extraordinary story of the biggest drug trafficker America has ever seen. Our story kicks off in 1983, right at the tail end of the wild 1982nd. Drug smuggling into America was absolutely exploding. Colombian cartels ran the show, with the infamous Medellin cartel and that psycho Pablo Escobar leading the charge. These cartels were recruiting American citizens left and right to work as their inside accomplices. The American authorities, especially the DEA, weren't sitting around doing nothing. They declared all-out war against the smugglers. Here's how it worked. American smugglers would fly their tiny private planes down to Colombia, load up with cocaine, then fly back to deliver the goods. Once stateside, domestic drug networks would distribute and sell the product throughout the country. It was a simple system. But simple doesn't mean easy. The DEA figured out quickly that Florida was the main entry point for most drug imports. Geography made it obvious. Florida sits closest to Colombia. These small smuggler planes couldn't fly long distances because of limited fuel capacity. They had to take the shortest route possible, which meant the straight shot between Florida and Colombia. The DEA started watching these smugglers closely and noticed something interesting. These guys had a uniform look. Gold chains, expensive watches, similar outfits. Like they all shopped at the same drug dealer starter pack store. The DEA used this pattern to target and arrest dozens of them. They had more operatives stationed in Florida than anywhere else in the country. The net was tightening. To crush drug smuggling completely, the DEA built a massive surveillance network. Ground-based radar systems, aerial radar planes conducting 24/7 patrols. Even the US Navy joined the party with radar-equipped warships monitoring coastal areas where smugglers took off. The DEA covered land, air, and sea. Operating became nearly impossible for smugglers. Some smugglers tried getting more cunning with their tactics, but intense police campaigns kept closing in. The DEA got smart too. Instead of arresting smugglers immediately after discovery, they let them continue while secretly monitoring their operations. This strategy led them not just to smugglers, but to the drug dealers inside the country. The trap was perfectly set. One man dared to challenge the entire system. He smuggled way more drugs than any other trafficker, shipments worth billions. This guy used incredibly clever methods to evade the extensive security radar network. The DEA knew he existed but couldn't track him down or arrest him, despite assigning a special task force just for him. His case became their top priority because he was accomplishing what dozens of other smugglers were doing combined. So who was this ghost? How did he pull off his operations? And how did he stay hidden from their sight for so long? The reason this task proved so challenging was simple. They were searching in the wrong place. This smuggler wasn't operating in Florida, and he didn't fit the typical smuggler profile at all. The man is Rick Lucius. He was a businessman and seemingly law-abiding citizen living in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He lived such a quiet life that nobody would ever imagine he was trafficking drugs. What helped Rick was his expertise as both a pilot and aviation engineer of the highest caliber. He'd been obsessed with aviation since childhood. Get this, he got his pilot's license while still in high school. He attended aviation college, where he studied everything about flying, piloting aircraft, engineering them. He became a true aviation expert. After graduating, he became a specialized aviation professor. Shortly after, he started his own venture and established a company called Air America. This company specialized in modifying small private aircraft like the ones you see today. The modifications included increasing fuel tank capacity to extend aircraft range without frequent refueling. Instead of flying only 1,000 kilometers, after modifications it could fly twice the distance. With increased fuel capacity came increased weight, requiring wing modifications and strengthening. Sometimes they had to change wheels and engines too. Rick and his company executed these modifications with absolute professionalism and precision. They gained a strong reputation and considerable fame. Business thrived, profits soared, and this granted Rick high social status. He befriended important people in society. Police leaders, the state governor. He had multiple meetings with them, discussing business and possible city developments. Success was intoxicating. Rick started attending important events and gatherings. As mentioned earlier, he even met the former US president at one of these occasions. He became a significant figure in the community. Everything seemed perfect from all angles until 1980 arrived. That year, a severe economic crisis hit the world, affecting America particularly hard. Rick's company faced significant challenges as regular clients, business owners, and entrepreneurs suddenly disappeared. Instead, a new type of customer emerged: suspicious individuals who appeared connected to criminal gangs. These customers' requests were always dubious. They wanted modifications to create hidden storage spaces where they could conceal goods without detection, even if aircraft were searched. Such suspicious requests made it obvious these individuals were smuggling illegal items. Rick knew these clients were likely trafficking illicit goods. However, due to his company's financial difficulties, he reluctantly accepted these dubious customers and performed their suspicious modifications. For a period, he continued working with questionable clients. On one occasion, after Rick and his staff completed requested modifications to a client's plane, the client insisted on paying with illegal drugs. Rick, desperately needing money to pay his workers' salaries, found himself without choice but to accept the bag of drugs. The client turned out to be an undercover police officer. As soon as he handed Rick the drugs, they arrested him on the spot and seized the bag. Through interrogation and investigation, they realized Rick wasn't a real drug dealer but rather a struggling businessman trying to save his company by any means possible. The DEA offered him a deal. They promised to release him without imprisonment or punishment in exchange for information about his suspicious clients. Many were likely involved in drug smuggling and using modified planes for illicit activities. Rick agreed to the deal and started informing authorities about suspicious individuals or activities within his company. In 1981, through one of his clients, Rick connected to a drug smuggling cartel based in Tampa, Florida. As previously mentioned, Florida was central for smugglers due to proximity to Colombia, the major cocaine-producing country. The cartel saw potential in Rick. He possessed exceptional skills as both pilot and engineer. Rick received an offer to become the cartel's pilot and transporter in exchange for substantial money. Considering his company's financial crisis, Rick saw this as an opportunity to make quick cash and inject funds back into his struggling business. He agreed to work with the cartel, believing it would be temporary and help him recover financially. However, he soon discovered many cartel members weren't just smugglers but drug users, which negatively affected their work ethics and operations. Even their planes were disorganized. Additional fuel tanks were placed openly inside aircraft cabins, and cargo, including drugs, was scattered haphazardly around them. The cartel's main base was in Florida, a state heavily monitored by the DEA, with numerous radar systems detecting suspicious aircraft movements. This was amateur hour. Rick knew he could do better. Despite the massive risks, Rick managed to completely avoid radar detection during his flights between Pennsylvania and Colombia. This made him incredibly valuable to the drug producers in Medellin. From his very first flight, Rick skillfully dodged radar systems, making successful round trips without getting caught once. He absolutely deserved the substantial payment he received, money that would save his struggling company. Rick executed 3 smuggling operations total with this cartel, but eventually he decided to cut ties due to increasing risks and the cartel members' sloppy preparations. At that moment, he thought this might mark the end of his smuggling career. But Rick's professionalism and precise performance compared to other amateur smugglers caught the attention of high-ranking figures in the Colombian drug industry. The big players were watching. A leader from the Medellin cartel named Jorge Ochoa, close friend of Escobar, and significant cartel figure responsible for most cocaine entering America, personally reached out to Rick. During their meeting, they talked extensively. Rick became convinced to return to the smuggling business once again. These weren't small-time smugglers like before. These were the real drug producers. Rick knew this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up, especially when Jorge generously promised him millions and a life of wealth, vowing to transform his existence completely. However, at the end of their meeting, Jorge gave him a stern warning. If you ever deceive us, we will find you, and this will be your end. Despite the risks, Rick understood the dangerous world he was stepping into. He was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. His first challenge was figuring out how to make a direct flight from Pennsylvania to Colombia without refueling. This would require Rick to make aircraft modifications more robust than anything he'd done before. Rick acquired a Cessna 310, a model he'd worked with extensively and knew every detail of. The aircraft's natural range was about 1,500 kilometers, so step one was modifying its fuel tank capacity. Original capacity was around 2,000 gallons, but Rick ingeniously increased it to 6,000 gallons, tripling the fuel it could carry. This enhancement would allow the plane to cover the vast distance required for direct flight. To avoid drawing attention from authorities, Rick knew he had to be discreet with modifications. Unlike other smugglers who placed fuel barrels inside plane cabins, which looked suspicious and out of place, Rick came up with a clever solution. He obtained sturdy rubber bags that could be filled with fuel, strategically hiding them throughout the aircraft structure. Rick utilized every available empty space in the plane. He stored fuel bags in the front of the aircraft, beneath flooring, in luggage compartments, and along wing sides. He ensured fuel distribution remained even and balanced. He established connections, allowing fuel to flow equally from all bags to engines, maintaining plane stability during flight. This meticulous approach optimized fuel consumption while keeping aircraft weight properly balanced. Adding all this extra fuel increased load on the aircraft. Rick needed to strengthen wings and wheel struts to handle additional weight. He also required a more powerful engine capable of carrying the plane's heavier load over long distances. He completely replaced the engine and made all these modifications, ensuring everything was precisely calibrated and work was done flawlessly. Rick also made internal aircraft adjustments. He installed a radar device that could detect other radars and aerial patrols conducted by the Drug Enforcement Administration. Rick wasn't just modifying aircraft. He was thinking smartly, finding ways to ensure he wouldn't get caught. Furthermore, he managed to bribe a corrupt customs agent who provided radar locations and patrol schedules, allowing him to avoid them easily. Rick established a radio communication network along the entire route from Pennsylvania to Colombia. He used secret codes to directly communicate with the cartel, avoiding phone calls since those communications could be monitored. Rick was intelligent and cautious. He calculated everything before taking any step. Throughout this period, he consistently maintained his relationship with drug enforcement agents, the very agents who'd recruited him to catch suspicious clients when first apprehended selling drugs. He developed close rapport with them, talking daily and playing the cooperative person role. Occasionally he provided useful information, helping them apprehend other smugglers. The agents trusted him completely, unaware that behind their backs he was preparing for a smuggling operation larger than anything they'd ever seen before. The double game was masterful. Finally, after 3 months of research and planning, Rick took his first flight and flew directly from Pennsylvania to Colombia. The journey lasted a full 13 hours, covering 5,000 kilometers without needing to refuel. Upon reaching Colombia at the agreed location, he landed on an improvised airstrip, not a real runway, just an open field. Cartel members were waiting, and as soon as he landed, they began loading drugs onto his plane and refueling it. While they finished their tasks, Rick rested after the long flight. Simultaneously, he calculated the aircraft's new weight with additional cargo and measured the makeshift runway length. He knew the heavier the plane, the longer distance required for takeoff. Precise calculations were crucial. Unfortunately, The airstrip wasn't paved. To make matters worse, there were inclines and declines with a cluster of trees at the end. Takeoff was challenging initially, but as it reached the makeshift runway's end, just as Rick anticipated, the plane managed to take off without crashing. This contrasted with many other smugglers whose overloaded planes crashed due to excessive weight. Rick's powerful new engine modification proved effective in handling the extra load. On the return journey, Rick chose a different, longer route, supposedly safer and farther from Drug Enforcement Administration and Border Patrol facilities with their radars. Rick was confident he could take this route because he'd ensured the plane was stocked with even more fuel than needed. However, mid-flight, the radar inside his plane alerted him that another aircraft was pursuing him. It was a Navy surveillance plane conducting border patrols. This meant he could encounter them anywhere. If they got close, it would be the end. They'd arrest him or shoot down his plane. He had to get rid of them quickly before they closed in. The hunt was on. The problem was they were already on his radar, and his speed wouldn't allow him to outfly them. His only option was entering a nearby thunderstorm. If Rick flew into it, radar signals would be disrupted, giving him a chance to escape. Of course, this was high risk. The choices were either spending the rest of his life in prison or facing a dangerous thunderstorm. The odds favored the storm, and that's exactly what Rick did without hesitation, hoping the Navy plane wouldn't be prepared to follow him into it. Thankfully, Rick was a seasoned pilot, perhaps the best among all smugglers. After 2 tense hours, he successfully emerged from the storm unscathed. Flying low to avoid radar detection, he then landed on an abandoned runway, only touching down briefly before taking off again. The reason behind this maneuver was making it seem like he was taking off from that location, not arriving from a long trip from Colombia. This way, radar signals would show him as a regular aircraft flying locally. Afterward, Rick headed to Scranton, his hometown, communicating with the control tower and officially recording his arrival as a short domestic flight within the state. This further dispelled any suspicions. Besides, there were no suspicions about local pilots in that area. Authorities believed all smugglers were operating in Florida, completely unaware someone could modify a small aircraft to fly such distances. Finally, back in his hometown, Rick delivered the cargo to local drug dealers and distributors. In exchange for this nearly 1-ton load of cocaine, he received $1 million for this one daring journey. Cartel leaders were astonished by his performance and innovative methods, allowing him to conduct multiple smuggling operations throughout the year. On each trip, Rick smuggled hundreds of kilograms of cocaine, earning $1 million or more per trip. He started amassing wealth beyond his wildest dreams. Surprisingly, he even expanded operations, forming his own specialized gang and employing more pilots. Flight numbers increased significantly, everything under his close supervision, especially meticulous aircraft modifications. Each aircraft was professionally customized, demonstrating his attention to detail and dedication to his new world. He became more experienced, and Rick's cautiousness diminished gradually. Fear dwindled, and caution decreased remarkably. Despite smuggling risks, Rick and his gang never lost a single flight or aircraft. Such incidents were common in the smuggling business, but Rick's team was the exception. He'd become so adept that cartel leaders marveled at his work. They often rewarded him with amounts higher than initially agreed upon, because Rick genuinely saved them money, transporting goods more efficiently than they ever dreamed possible. Throughout this period, Rick maintained relationships with undercover DEA agents. They were unaware of his real identity as a smuggler, and genuinely believed he was cooperating. Rick strategically selected and shared useful information that helped them but never exposed him directly. He portrayed himself as an ally within drug cartels, gaining their trust while secretly staying one step ahead as the country's most prominent trafficker. But in 1984, disaster struck when the Florida smuggling gang Rick worked for in his first operation got busted. Rick got caught along with them. In total, 15 individuals were apprehended, including Rick, and they were all sent to Florida to stand trial for smuggling activities in the state. During trial, Rick confessed he did indeed carry out these smuggling operations with the gang, but he did it with the intention of cooperating with the DEA. He aimed to provide them with valuable, in-depth information about drug smuggling movements in the country. Remarkably, Rick even convinced the DEA agents he was working with to come testify in court on his behalf. Meanwhile, Rick had reasons to be fearful. He worried that news of the trial, his DEA cooperation, and his involvement in local drug smuggling activities would reach Colombian cartels. He feared they might consider him a traitor due to his double dealing. To maintain credibility, Rick continued participating in smuggling operations between court sessions. He found himself on trial for smuggling while embarking on smuggling trips during weekends. The trial lasted 11 weeks. During that time, Rick managed to carry out 11 smuggling trips. He earned a staggering $13 million from these trips while facing trial. Surprisingly, among the 15 defendants, he was the only one acquitted, thanks to DEA agent testimony. Rick's smuggling success had amassed tens of millions, but handling such large sums required laundering. To achieve this, he sought assistance from Michael Coffey, a banking expert who helped transfer money to offshore accounts outside the United States, making it appear clean. However, Rick faced a new problem with one of his pilots, a man named Jim Cooper. This pilot had returned from Colombia, carrying a drug shipment. There was another person who was supposed to be a local distributor, waiting at the airstrip to receive the shipment. However, by mistake, the drug dealer parked his car on the runway. When Jim attempted to land, the plane collided with the car. The drug dealer was killed. The incident was reported, and police arrived on scene. They discovered the type of cargo Jim was carrying, and realized he was a smuggler. He was promptly arrested, now charged not only with drug smuggling but also with unintentional murder. After investigation was completed, Jim was given the right to make a call to anyone he wanted. The first person who came to Jim's mind was his gang leader, Rick. When Rick heard the news, he panicked. Instead of trying to calm Jim down and negotiate with him to keep quiet, he chose to completely abandon Jim, leaving him to fend for himself. Jim felt his boss had abandoned him. Given the serious charges he faced, he might receive a 30 or 40-year prison sentence. As a result, Jim decided to strike a deal with authorities, offering them information about Rick and his smuggling operations in exchange for immunity. Through Jim's confessions, authorities began taking action against Rick and his company, Air America. However, they needed more evidence to arrest Rick based solely on Jim's confession. Consequently, they conducted a thorough review of everything related to him: company invoices, communications, movements, even bank accounts. With such a massive investigation, it was expected to take time. Rick was aware they were investigating him and knew that sooner or later they'd arrest him. To prepare for the inevitable, he transferred around $30 million to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Believing the Cayman Islands didn't have an extradition treaty with the United States, Rick fled to the same location with his airplane. Unfortunately for him, he was wrong. US authorities were able to trace his money to the Cayman Islands and found out he was there. They sent a report about him to local authorities on the island. Despite the absence of any extradition treaty between them, local authorities decided Rick was a troublemaker and undesirable. In 1986, local police on the island arrested Rick and handed him over to US authorities. Once back in the United States, investigation began. The charges were severe, ranging from various criminal activities to a potential sentence of up to 345 years in prison. To avoid such an outrageous sentence, Rick chose to cooperate with investigators and informed them of his hidden money's location. They seized over $21 million in cash. In addition to the money, he fully disclosed all operations, providing detailed explanations of criminal activities and how he ran his operations. As a result of his cooperation, Rick's sentence was reduced to just 8.5 years. Considering his status as one of America's biggest smugglers, this was relatively short. However, it's certain he didn't reveal all the money he'd hidden. After serving his sentence, he'd find a substantial amount waiting for him. The DEA considered that information they obtained from him was more valuable than keeping him in prison for more years. For years, America's most dangerous drug smuggler moved tons of product right under the government's nose, vanishing into the skies like a ghost every time they got close. But while he always reappeared, not everyone is so lucky. Some people step out their front door and are never seen again. What follows are the creepiest cases of people disappearing, stories that still leave chills and questions to this day. Mount Shasta, also known as White Mountain, is an active volcano, towering in the Cascade Mountain Range in California. At 14,179 feet high, it's the second highest peak in the Cascades and the fifth highest in the state. But here's what makes it truly terrifying. Mount Shasta has an estimated volume of 85 cubic miles, making it the most voluminous stratovolcano in the Cascade Volcanic Arc. Snowfall on the mountain and surrounding area nearly doubles the US average. There's a small chance it could erupt at any time, though the last eruption was thought to be around 3,200 years ago. The mountain attracts climbers from around the world. The most popular route is the 7-mile-long John Muir route, also called the Avalanche Gulch route, which gains 7,362 feet of elevation. The mountain is considered one of the best entry-level true mountaineering experiences in the United States, offering beginner big mountain snow climbing routes without the added hazards of crevasses and ice falls. A skilled climber can reach the summit in a day, but most people prefer stopping overnight at either the campsite at the 50/50th Plateau, almost exactly halfway up, or the Helen Lake campsite, which sits higher. To reach the top, you need both a summit pass, $25 per person, for climbing above 10,000 feet, and a wilderness permit. Before even starting, you hike 4 miles up 2 separate trails to a camp where an old Sierra Club cabin marks the beginning of your real climb. Mount Shasta is the focus of countless legends and folklore that would make most people question reality. Native American tribes of the area believed the mountain to be sacred and the home of the creator of the universe. But the more outlandish stories involve something called the Lemurians. The legend grew from an offhand mention of Lemuria in the 1882nd, and in 1905, A Dweller on Two Planets by Frederick Spencer, Oliver claimed that survivors from a sunken continent called Lemuria were living in or on Mount Shasta. The story goes that starting in the 1942nd, people began seeing these mysterious beings. They are apparently 2.1 meters, 7 feet tall, have long hair, and wear white robes and sandals. They'd show up at the local store for supplies, and here's the crazy part: they would pay only with lumps of pure gold. According to believers, Telos is a crystal city inside the mountain, inhabited by higher dimensional beings called Lemurians. Oliver's Lemurians lived in a complex system of tunnels beneath with jeweled walls and fur-carpeted floors within the mountain, and occasionally were seen walking the surface dressed in white. The saucer-shaped clouds that often appear at the summit? Supposedly they're cover for flying saucers landing above Telos to bring cargo to these interdimensional beings. Carl Herbert Landers didn't believe any of that mystical nonsense, but he had a deep fascination with the mountain anyway. At 69 years old, he decided he wanted to conquer the summit. Carl was an experienced climber, about as fit as you could get at his age. He ran every morning, and had even managed to finish the Boston Marathon in around 5.5 hours, impressive for anyone, let alone someone pushing 70. Carl had set himself an ambitious goal: climb the highest peak in each county of California. Mount Shasta was his target for Siskiyou County. He'd actually attempted it before in May 1998, but brutal weather and crushing altitude sickness forced him to retreat. The mountain had beaten him once. The following year, he was back again, determined to finally cross it off his list. On May 21st, 1999, Carl and 2 friends, Barry and Milt, stayed in a motel near the trailhead. At 4 a.m. sharp, they gathered their climbing equipment and left for the grueling 4-mile hike to the camp at the cabin. The walk turned into a nightmare as deep snow drifts made progress painfully slow. Every step was a battle against the mountain's defenses. A couple of hours later, they finally reached the camp and began the real climb up the mountain. Because the snow had slowed them down significantly, they realized they couldn't make it to the Lake Helen camp before nightfall. Instead, they decided to stop at the 50/50th Plateau overnight, setting up camp exactly halfway to their goal. October night. The wind screamed across the plateau. Carl doubled over in his tent, clutching his stomach. The Diamox wasn't working. Or maybe it was the problem. His bowels twisted like barbed wire. The medication was supposed to fight altitude sickness. Instead, it was destroying him from the inside. The gale outside howled like a wounded animal, but Carl couldn't wait. He unzipped his tent flap and stumbled into the freezing darkness. His friends heard nothing over the wind. When he crawled back inside an hour later, he was shivering, dehydrated, empty. Morning came too soon. Carl woke feeling like death warmed over. His mouth tasted like copper. His legs felt like lead. "I'm gonna slow you guys down," he muttered, pulling on his rust-brown coat. But he had a plan. Leave early, get a head start, make it to Lake Helen before they even woke up. The ski pants felt heavy as concrete. His boots clicked against the ice as he strapped on his crampons. Just 650 feet around the mountain's side. Easy for someone with his experience. He'd done harder climbs in his sleep. His friends watched him disappear into the grey morning mist. 30 minutes later, they packed up and followed his tracks. The plan was simple. Check the weather at the lake, and if it looked good, come back for supplies and push to the summit. They had no idea they'd never see Carl again. Barry lasted 20 minutes. His stomach started churning, and he turned back like a beaten dog. The 50/50th plateau welcomed him with cold indifference. Milt kept going. He was stronger, tougher. The lake was nothing for him. But when he got there, Carl wasn't waiting. The morning was crystal clear, perfect climbing weather. Maybe Carl had just kept going? Milt asked some campers if they'd seen anyone pass through. "Yeah, guy came through about an hour ago," one said, "heading up the mountain pretty fast." That was weird. Carl was sick, taking his time. Milt decided to chase after him. But whoever was climbing ahead was moving like a machine, fast, relentless, inhuman. When Milt finally caught sight of the figure, his blood froze. Wrong clothes, wrong everything. This wasn't Carl. Milt scrambled back to the lake, asked everyone again. Nobody else came through, they said. Maybe he missed Carl on the way down? These mountains played tricks on your eyes. Milt convinced himself that's what happened. 5 p.m. Back at camp. Barry was there, looking sick as a dog. Carl's tent was empty. His gear sat untouched like a shrine to the missing. That's when the cold reality hit Milt like a sledgehammer. Carl was gone. He contacted the local police that night. One call that would launch the biggest search in Mount Shasta's history. Sheriff's Department brought in the legend, Grizz Adams. 400 searches under his belt. If anyone could find Carl, it was him. Grizz assembled an army. Searchers on skis carved through fresh powder. Others trudged on foot through rocky terrain. Horseback riders covered the lower elevations like cowboys hunting ghosts. Helicopters thundered overhead. Air ambulance service. California Highway Patrol with infrared sensors that could detect body heat through snow and rock. The machines scanned every inch of the mountain with mechanical precision. Nothing. Ground teams worked in perfect grids. Volunteers poured in from neighboring counties. Carl's own running club showed up. People who knew his habits, his pace, his preferred routes. Professional climbers rappelled down every possible descent, exploring places where bodies might fall and hide. Tracker dogs arrived with their handlers. The best noses in the business. They sniffed Carl's gear, memorized his scent, then nothing. Not even the faintest trail. Dozens of interviews. Every climber on the mountain that day. Did you see a man in a rust-brown coat? Blank stares, head shakes. It was like Carl had been invisible. The search headquarters outgrew the local schoolyard. They moved operations to the airport. More resources, more manpower, more technology. Still nothing. No prints in the snow. No tracks in the dirt. No equipment dropped along any trail. If it wasn't for his gear back at the 50/50th plateau, you'd think Carl never existed. This was only the second unexplained disappearance on Mount Shasta, but the first on a flat, easy path with 100 other climbers around. No crevices, no hidden dangers, just empty air, where a man should be. The theories came fast and desperate. Maybe Carl fell into a hidden crevasse, but there weren't any on that route. Maybe he got disoriented and wandered off the path. But the terrain was wide open, visible for miles. Maybe his friends were lying, but why would they? The timeline was brutal in its simplicity. Last seen, morning, leaving camp. Distance to Lake Helen, less than 30 minutes on a straight, flat path. Weather, perfect visibility. Other climbers, dozens of witnesses who saw nothing. In the years since, thousands of people have walked that exact route. Hikers, climbers, searchers, curiosity seekers. They've examined every rock, every shadow, every possible hiding spot. Not a crampon, not a water bottle, not a single thread from his rust-brown coat. It's like the mountain opened its mouth and swallowed him whole, then closed again without leaving so much as a crack to show where he went. The mystery haunts Mount Shasta to this day. Carl's disappearance became legend among climbers, a story told around campfires to explain the inexplicable. Some say the mountain is alive. Others blame supernatural forces. But the truth might be simpler and more terrifying. Sometimes people just vanish, without reason, without trace, without ever being found. Durham, North Carolina. That's where Leah came from, and you could tell from a mile away, 5 feet flat, 130 pounds soaking wet. When she spoke, honey poured from her lips in the thickest southern accent this side of Alabama, but switched to Spanish, and she was flawless, fluent like she'd been born in Barcelona. Sandy hair caught sunlight like wheat in summer fields. Blue eyes reflected Carolina skies. She kept her body temple clean, soccer 3 times a week, vegetarian diet strict as scripture. Her only sins were coffee and the occasional cigarette when life got too heavy. 1993. 17 years old. Her father got the diagnosis that changed everything. Chronic lung disease. Rare. The kind that slowly steals your breath until there's nothing left. 3 years of watching him fade. Then 1996 hit like a freight train. Her mother. Heart attack. Sudden as lightning. Final as death. Leah was studying Spanish and anthropology at NC State when the call came. The college let her take time off. They understood grief doesn't follow academic calendars. I felt like I was born again, she told friends later. Into a life without a mom. The words carried weight that only orphans understand. Death has a way of reshaping you from the inside out. The year death came hunting again. Leah was driving when a truck pulled out like it owned the road. Her car crumpled against its side like paper against stone. The impact should have killed her. Instead, it just broke her leg so badly that surgeons had to rebuild it with metal and hope. She talked about being born again by the crash. 3rd time she'd used those words. 3rd time death had touched her and let her live. Some people collect scars. Leah collected resurrections. Recovery was slow. Physical therapy. Learning to walk on a leg held together by titanium and determination. But she was planning something. Costa Rica. A chance to test her Spanish in the wild, away from everything that reminded her of loss. Then her father's disease won. Terminal. The doctors gave him weeks. Leah's trip was scheduled to leave in days. She almost cancelled. Almost stayed home to watch another parent die. But her father had other ideas. "You go," he whispered from his hospital bed. "Live for both of us." So she did. Costa Rica became a memorial trip, adventure mixed with grief, exploration flavored with goodbye. When she came back, her father was gone. The inheritance came with his blessing and a silent challenge. What would she do with the rest of her life? The college degree was 6 months away. 6 months from becoming another statistic with a diploma and a plan. But Leah had tasted freedom in Costa Rica. She'd felt what it meant to live without schedules, without expectations, without the weight of other people's dreams. She dropped out. Her sister Cara freaked. Her brother Heath called her crazy. "You're so close to graduating," they pleaded. "Don't waste everything now." But Leah wasn't wasting anything. She was investing in herself. The inheritance money bought her time. Time to journal. Time to play guitar until her fingers bled. Time to take photographs of shadows and light and moments that would never come again. Her old friends started seeing less of her. She was becoming someone new. Someone unpredictable. Someone who went out more, met different people, asked different questions. She was still Leah, but she was also becoming something else. Something restless. Something that couldn't be contained by other people's expectations. Her friends worried. Her family worried. But Leah seemed relatively happy, even if she was growing more private by the day. Like she was planning something she couldn't talk about yet. The 9th of March, 2000. Leah calls Cara that morning. They talk and joke around like they always do, discussing Leah's plans to head to the mountains soon. Everything seems perfectly normal. Later that afternoon, she talks with her friend Nicole and agrees to babysit with her the following day. Based on their conversation, it seemed like she had no intention of going anywhere anytime soon. But just before 6 p.m. that same day, something changes. Leah abruptly loads all of her belongings into her Jeep Cherokee, including her cat, withdraws $3,000 in cash from her bank account, and then vanishes without a trace. When Leah doesn't show up for babysitting the next day, Nicole isn't immediately worried. Like many writers, Leah was known to be somewhat forgetful and flighty, so Nicole figures it just slipped her mind. But when there's no sign of Leah for another 2 days, people start getting concerned. Kara begins calling everyone who might know where her sister could be, but nobody has seen her anywhere. 4 days after she disappeared, on the 13th of March, Kara drives to Leah's apartment looking for any clues about where she might have gone. She discovers that Leah had taken most of her belongings with her, making it look like wherever she'd gone, she'd deliberately chosen to leave. But something feels wrong about the whole situation. The phone call she'd just had with Leah before she left, how upbeat and normal she sounded, her talk of future plans, none of it suggested she was planning to disappear. This realization prompts Kara to file a missing person report with the police. While Kara searches through Leah's apartment, she discovers something strange. A folded piece of paper dated the 9th of March, the same day Leah disappeared. On the outside of the paper, Leah had drawn the Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland, smiling and half invisible, just like in the story. When Kara opens it up, she finds enough cash inside to cover a month's rent and bills, along with a handwritten letter from her sister. Some parts of the letter make perfect sense, like telling them she'd left cookies in the freezer as a going-away present for everyone to enjoy. But other parts are confusing and cryptic. Leah tells Kara not to worry about her, and reassures everyone that she isn't a danger to herself. The letter asks people to have faith in her, in themselves, and in everyone around them. It reminds them that everyone is together in thoughts and prayers, and that time passes quickly when you're waiting. She offers her room and laptop, one of the few valuable possessions she left behind, to whoever might want to use them while she's gone. And finally, the letter ends with a simple instruction: remember Jack Kerouac. Kara stares at the drawing and thinks this, combined with the Cheshire Cat picture, proves that Leah decided to follow in her idol's footsteps, just like they'd always suspected she might. The Cheshire Cat suddenly disappears in Alice in Wonderland, only to reappear sometime later when it chooses to. Why and when the cat does this remains a mystery in the story, and Kara becomes convinced that this is exactly the message Leah is trying to send them. While this theory is still somewhat worrying, Kara has one advantage: she has access to Leah's bank accounts. Leah had given Kara this access just before her trip to Costa Rica, so Kara could handle any financial issues that might come up while she was traveling abroad. Kara goes to Leah's bank and obtains all the transaction records, using them to trace her sister's movements as carefully as possible. From what she can piece together, Leah spent the night of the 9th of March, 1902, the day she disappeared, in a hotel room in Lebanon, Tennessee. The next day, she bought gas using her debit card while driving west down the I-40 interstate. She then continued moving toward Oregon, managing to cover that entire distance in just 3.5 days of hard driving. Once she reached Oregon, she took the I-5 north toward Washington state, and just after midnight on the 13th of March, she stopped to refuel at a gas station in Brooks, Oregon. Unfortunately, that gas station purchase was where all the electronic transactions suddenly ended, leaving no more digital breadcrumbs to follow. Police managed to obtain surveillance footage from that final gas station, and they find clear video of Leah wearing a distinctive wide-brimmed hat and looking perfectly healthy and well. Before walking back outside to her car, she pauses several times to look through the window, as if she's watching something or someone in the parking lot. Unfortunately, the gas station's security cameras were only positioned inside the building, watching the entrance and the cash registers, so there's no way of knowing what exactly she was looking at outside. But regardless of what caught her attention, this surveillance footage represents the very last time anyone ever sees Leah Roberts alive. When Kara's 25th birthday arrives and passes without receiving any phone call from her sister, she becomes even more worried than before. No matter where Leah was in the world, or what kind of adventure she was on, Kara knows that her sister would have found a way to check in on that special day, if she possibly could. This lack of contact leads Kara to believe that Leah wasn't just making her way to Desolation Peak for some spiritual journey, but that something had gone seriously wrong. And unfortunately, Kara's worst fears are proved right when they discover Leah's car just a little while later. The 18th of March, 2000. Two joggers are running down Canyon Creek Road near Mount Baker in Washington state. The area sits just south of the Canadian border and consists of a small logging road that connects to the Mount Baker Highway, providing access for people living in remote houses and logging camps to reach the main roads. As the joggers make their way along the route, they begin noticing pieces of clothing hanging strangely in the trees along the roadside. Curious and concerned, they decide to follow this trail of scattered items, which eventually leads them to discover a vehicle wreck at the bottom of a steep ravine. The mangled car turns out to be Leah's Jeep Cherokee, and they realize they're standing just 100 miles away from Desolation Peak, Jack Kerouac's famous mountain. This is where the case starts getting genuinely confusing for investigators. Police examine the scene and determine that the vehicle must have been traveling at an excessive speed, nearly 40 miles per hour, when it left the road and went airborne. The pattern of broken branches and the way the car's contents have been violently thrown around and scattered outside the vehicle makes it clear that the Jeep rolled multiple times before finally slamming into the steep embankment below. But here's what's truly bizarre. There's absolutely no sign of a body anywhere in the area, and police don't believe Leah was actually inside the car when it crashed down into the ravine. If anyone had been trapped in the vehicle during such a violent crash, there would have been obvious damage to the seatbelt system, a completely shattered windshield, and definite traces of blood throughout the interior, but investigators find none of these telltale signs. However, at the same time, there's also no evidence to suggest that the car had been deliberately pushed off the road or staged to look like an accident. There are no suspicious marks on the exterior to indicate it had been shoved, and nothing was holding the steering wheel in position or weighing down the accelerator pedal. Even stranger than all of this is the fact that the wreck clearly hadn't been abandoned immediately after the crash occurred. Someone had used pillows and blankets to carefully cover all the windows, and it genuinely looked like someone had been living inside the wrecked vehicle for a short period of time before eventually leaving it behind. But if the person living in the wreck had indeed been Leah, at some point she departed without taking any of her most important possessions with her. Most of the $3,000 in cash was still there, along with her checkbook and all of her bank cards. She had also left behind her beloved guitar, her entire CD collection, her passport, and her driver's license, all things she would need if she was planning to start a new life somewhere else. On top of all that, after her cat, Leah's most sacred and precious possession was a diamond engagement ring that had belonged to her deceased mother. While the cat food and carrier were still in the wreck, the cat itself was nowhere to be found, and the invaluable ring was discovered hidden under a floor mat, as if someone had deliberately concealed it there. This discovery particularly terrifies Kara and Heath, because they simply cannot imagine any scenario where Leah would willingly leave that ring behind. 220, it meant everything to her. But other than these disturbing findings, the only real clue investigators discover is a movie ticket for American Beauty at a theater in Bellingham, Washington, carefully preserved in a little keepsake box. During the intensive investigation that follows, police bring in a professional search and rescue team equipped with helicopters to conduct aerial searches from above, and they also deploy specially trained tracking dogs to see if they can pick up any scent trails that might reveal where Leah had gone after the crash. The working theory at this point is that she somehow survived the violent crash, but then stumbled out into the wilderness in a confused or injured state. The search teams spend the next 2 intensive weeks methodically searching the entire length of Canyon Creek Road and combing through all the dense forest areas nearby, but they don't find any sign of Leah or any evidence to suggest that anyone else had been in that remote area recently. They also systematically check all the hospitals in the surrounding region, wondering if she might have survived the crash but was suffering from severe amnesia due to a traumatic head injury. But there's no patient anywhere fitting her description. During the ongoing search efforts, Kara flies out to Washington and goes directly to Bellingham Mall to distribute missing person flyers and put up posters with Leah's photo everywhere she can. The movie ticket they found was for a 2:30 p.m. showing, and Kara reasonably guesses that her sister probably would have wanted to grab something to eat beforehand, which means someone working in the area must have seen her that day. She methodically asks around the busy food court and eventually manages to find a server who remembers seeing Leah. According to this witness, she was sitting at the bar in the mall's only proper sit-down restaurant, dining alone but engaged in friendly conversation with 2 different men who were seated on either side of her at the bar. When police successfully track down the first man for questioning, he clearly remembers his interaction with Leah that day. He tells them she seemed very friendly and talkative, enthusiastically discussing Jack Kerouac and sharing her exciting travel plans with him, before leaving to attend the movie by herself. However, the second man they locate tells them a completely different version of events. While he agrees that Leah had been upbeat and talkative during their conversation, he insists that she definitely hadn't been alone at the theater. According to his account, she went to see American Beauty with a man she was with named Barry. This second witness provides such an unusually detailed description of this mysterious Barry that police are able to create a composite sketch based on his information. Barry is described as a white man with a distinctively long, thin face, a reasonably square jawline, medium-length hair, brushed backwards, with no visible part, and a noticeable earring in his right ear. But here's the truly weird part. Despite this incredibly detailed description, absolutely no one else working in the restaurant that day had seen this supposed companion. Because this man's description was far more detailed than what investigators typically expect from casual eyewitness accounts, police begin to seriously suspect that the second witness might somehow be involved in Leah's mysterious disappearance. About a week after Leah's wrecked Jeep is discovered, an anonymous male caller contacts police with what could be a crucial lead. He nervously tells them that his wife claims to have seen Leah at a Texaco gas station in Everett, Washington, and that she appeared to be acting very strangely, possibly disoriented or confused. The man mentions that his wife seemed quite shaken by the encounter, and then he abruptly hangs up the phone in what sounds like a panic. Everett is located about 60 miles south of Bellingham, which would fit perfectly with the timeline investigators have been trying to piece together. Unfortunately, police never hear back from this mysterious anonymous witness again, and no one has ever been able to figure out what might have spooked the caller so badly that he felt compelled to hang up so suddenly and never make contact again. Even worse for the investigation, this anonymous phone call turns out to be the very last credible lead they receive. After this point, the case goes completely cold, and there are no more tips, sightings, or any other information that might help solve the mystery. Understandably, Kara absolutely refuses to let her sister's case fade into obscurity and be forgotten. She reaches out to a woman named Monica Kazon, who has built a reputation specializing in helping the families of victims in missing persons, cold cases that have stalled out. Monica runs an extensive network of dedicated volunteers called the Community United Effort, and together they begin organizing events and campaigns designed to keep Leah's memory alive in the public consciousness. On the 4th anniversary of her disappearance in 2005, they organize an emotional caravan of cars that drives the exact same route Leah took on her journey to Bellingham, and this meaningful tribute becomes the foundation for an annual commemorative event. Monica also manages to get Kara booked as a guest on Larry King Live to help raise national awareness about the case and keep it in the media spotlight. All this sustained media attention proves crucial when Kara asks police officials to keep holding onto Leah's car and all her personal possessions instead of disposing of them, and they agree to her request, something they might not have been willing to do otherwise without the public pressure. This decision turns out to be incredibly fortunate, because in 2007, a fresh detective gets assigned to take over the case after the original lead investigator retires from the force. The very first thing this new detective team decides to do is attempt another comprehensive search of the area. This time around, they deploy specially trained cadaver dogs and bring in metal detectors, hoping that if Leah's body had been buried somewhere near the crash site, they might be able to use the metal detection equipment to locate the surgical metal rod that had been implanted in Leah's leg from a previous injury. Once again, despite their best efforts and new technology, they don't manage to find anything significant, so they turn their attention to re-examining all the physical evidence that had been collected and stored from the original investigation. This is when the new team notices several important details that the previous investigators had somehow overlooked or missed entirely. One crucial thing that nobody on the original team had thought to properly examine was the Jeep's engine compartment. When the new detectives ask the forensics team to pop open the hood and take a closer look, they make a startling discovery. Someone had deliberately removed the cover to the starter relay system. With this specific modification, it becomes possible to put the key in the ignition and use the exposed relay to make the car accelerate forward, even when there isn't actually a driver sitting inside the vehicle. This is a very specialized piece of automotive knowledge that only a professional mechanic or someone with extensive car repair experience would know how to do properly. As it happens, the second man who had been sitting next to Leah at the restaurant that day, the one who claimed she left with Barry, turns out to have been an ex-military mechanic with exactly this type of technical expertise. The new investigative team also discovers clear fingerprints on the underside of the hood, providing additional evidence that someone had deliberately tampered with the vehicle's engine. With these two significant findings in hand, they know they absolutely need to bring the ex-military mechanic back in for much more intensive questioning. Unfortunately, he has since moved to Canada, which makes getting him back to the United States for interrogation quite difficult and time-consuming. but eventually they managed to extradite him and conduct a thorough interview while collecting his DNA samples and fingerprints for comparison. But once again, the investigation hits a frustrating dead end when his prints don't match the ones found on the car, eliminating him as a suspect despite the suspicious circumstances. However, the new investigative team also decides to retrieve some of Leah's clothing items from evidence storage and send them to the FBI for advanced testing, using much more sophisticated techniques. The previous team had tested everything for blood evidence, but when Leah first disappeared in 2000, the technology needed to detect and analyze trace amounts of DNA simply didn't exist yet. The FBI lab work takes an incredibly long 3 years to complete. But in 2010 they finally achieve a breakthrough. Nolies. They successfully extract male DNA from Leah's clothing that doesn't belong to her or any family member. This crucial evidence completely changes the entire direction of the investigation. The original theories that she had either stumbled away from the crash site suffering from amnesia or had deliberately staged the whole disappearance because she wanted to start a new life somewhere else are completely abandoned in favor of evidence, strongly suggesting that something much more sinister had happened to her. Unfortunately, despite this major breakthrough, the male DNA profile hasn't matched with anyone in law enforcement databases yet, including the ex-military mechanic who remains a person of interest. The dedicated cold case team continues methodically working through whatever leads and evidence they can find. But more than a decade after they took over the investigation from the original detectives, they still aren't any closer to discovering the truth about what really happened to Leah Roberts on that fateful day. And that's exactly where both of these mysterious cases stand today, completely open and frustratingly unsolved, with families still desperately searching for answers. So what do you think actually happened in these cases? If you made it all the way through this analysis, thank you so much for watching and sticking with me, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video, where we'll dive into another fascinating mystery.